Exactly. So as long as you keep that trigger and the proximity sensor or Hall sensor or whatever you're using on a separate circuit, you'll never have to worry about it blowing up.
Blowing up a reader or a
So
transistor?
both, both. Because if you put too much, like say like a transistor, if you're using a transistor, if you put too much voltage in through the gate, well, guess you just blew up your gate on your transistor, and your transistor will be
So you're
non-functional.
using the proximity sensor to get yourself a steady trigger.
That's right. And
I got you.
uninhibited, I don't have to worry about back surges.
Why would the reed switch vary if you're giving it 12 volts? Why would because of the flyback is destroying it?
Yeah,
Right, the
the reed
flyback
switches
will,
blow up.
yeah, big time. And I blew up many, trust me,
Yeah.
Me too.
many reed switches. Like it
Okay,
started right
can I say something about reactive power here and radiant energy
Well,
and
I think you're one of the
radiant
things.
spikes? Okay, the radiant spike, right? Now, a lot of people want to dump the radiant spike into a capacitor and spend a couple minutes doing that, and then dump the capacitor somewhere else. But how is that keeping the reactive power reactive? You're
That's
removing by doing it
that's where
like
the
that.
transducer comes.
Well, what I'm saying is radiant energy is a reactive power. If you're going to select radiant energy over a period of a few minutes into a capacitor, you're right there. You just removed the reactive power by doing that. If you keep dumping the radiant back and forth right away each half cycle, instead of dumping it into a capacitor over many cycles, you know, and removing all these cycles into one cycle, into one long pulse. And if you keep the reactive power by dumping the flyback each half cycle, you keep the reactive power by doing it that way. If you do it by dumping the flyback over 1,000 flyback pulses into a capacitor, you just eliminated the reactive power by doing that. The reactive power being the reactive power.
Yeah, well, what you're
capacitive reactance. The reactance of the circuit is what you're destroying it by capturing more than one pulse, flyback pulse, into a capacitor. If you capture 2 flyback pulses into a capacitor, you just destroyed the reactive power. If you don't capture more than one pulse, you only capture one pulse, and you keep capturing it back and forth instead of capturing more than one pulse into a capacitor, you capture only one pulse into a capacitor, and you use that pulse right away out of that capacitor. And you only capture one pulse into that capacitor and use it right away. That's keeping the reactive power going. If you capture one pulse at a time into a capacitor and dump it into a bigger capacitor and store multiple pulses into a bigger capacitor, you're changing the reactive power into a slower frequency. You're losing the frequency of the original reactive power, being the radiant spike.
Yeah, I could see that happening.
And that radiant spike happens on the half cycle.
Yeah.
On 50% of the cycle.
Now, you also have to take into consideration too the size of the inductor or the coil that you're using to drive the motor. Now, I'm using, most of my coils are at least 1 pound. The one in the Renegade's almost 2.5 pounds. So that coil alone is going to have internal capacitance, all right? And there will be a certain amount of resistance too, because it's like a wire. So that's going to keep the coil, I guess you could say, inflated. Instead of having the field collapse all the way down to the blotch bulb, I'm keeping it pumped up. So I'm always kind of like staying ahead. So what's happening, it takes less power now from my input to keep that coil saturated. You see what I'm saying?
Because it has more mass?
Correct. Yes. Because of the induction size or it goes back to the Newman theory.
So the more mass the coil has, the longer it takes for the field to collapse.
Right. Exactly.
Kind of like a flywheel effect, huh?
Kind of, yeah. Like it's like if you go back to Newman too, right? He was using dead 9-volt batteries. He would put 84 of them in series, and he was pumping 460 volts DC at less than 50 milliamps, and he's driving a 7,000-pound motor.